There is something sacred about the hour when the world is still asleep. At 5 a.m., the noise of society disappears. The expectations of others fade away. The masks people wear during the day are nowhere to be found. What remains is only you and the quiet voice within you. Most people fear this silence. They rush to fill it with distractions, with noise, with endless scrolling and meaningless comfort. But the person who rises at 5 a.m. chooses something different. They choose confrontation. They choose awareness. They choose transformation. Because the early morning is not simply about productivity. It is about meeting the deepest parts of yourself. When you wake up before the world demands anything from you, you step into a space where your true self can finally speak. Your fears surface, your doubts appear, your dreams begin to whisper, and this is where real growth begins. People often misunderstand the meaning of freedom. They imagine freedom as the ability to do whatever they want, whenever they want, without restriction or effort. They believe that sleeping late, avoiding responsibility, and following every impulse is the true expression of a free life. But if you observe closely, you will notice something unsettling. The people who follow every impulse are rarely free. They are controlled by their habits, their emotions, their laziness, and their fears. What appears to be freedom on the surface slowly becomes a hidden form of slavery. This is why true freedom begins with discipline. In the philosophy of Carl Jung, a human being is not a single simple identity. We are a collection of competing forces. There is the part of you that seeks growth, responsibility, and meaning. But there is also another part that seeks comfort, avoidance, and instant gratification. Every day these forces quietly battle for control of your life. When discipline enters your life, it changes the balance of this battle. Discipline is not about punishment or harsh control. It is about choosing your higher self over your temporary desires. It is the moment when you decide that your future matters more than your comfort right now. It is the quiet decision to do what is necessary, even when your emotions resist it. And this is where real power begins. Imagine a person who wakes up only when they feel like it, works only when motivation appears, and stops whenever something becomes uncomfortable. At first, their life seems relaxed. But over time, something darker begins to happen. Opportunities slip away. Confidence weakens. Their potential slowly fades because it was never trained into action. Now imagine another person. This person understands that motivation is unreliable, but discipline is dependable. They wake up when it is difficult. They work when it is uncomfortable. They continue when others quit. At first, their life may seem harder, but slowly the results begin to appear. Skills grow stronger, confidence deepens, opportunities begin to open. What once required enormous effort becomes natural strength. This is the paradox of discipline. What feels restrictive in the beginning eventually creates the greatest freedom. When you discipline your mind, you are no longer controlled by mood swings. When you discipline your body, you are no longer limited by weakness. When you discipline your habits, you are no longer trapped by procrastination. Instead of reacting to life, you begin directing it. The undisciplined person waits for the right moment, the right mood, the right circumstances. But the disciplined person creates those circumstances through consistent action. And something profound happens during this process. Each time you choose discipline over comfort, your mind changes its identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who wishes for success and begin seeing yourself as someone who builds it. This shift is psychological and powerful. The moment a person realizes they can command themselves, a new level of confidence appears, because the greatest uncertainty in life is not external challenges. It is the question of whether you can rely on yourself. Discipline answers that question. It tells you that even when things become difficult, even when motivation disappears, even when fear appears, you will still move forward. And once you know that about yourself, something extraordinary happens. You stop fearing effort. You stop fearing struggle. You stop fearing the path ahead. Because you know that no matter how difficult the journey becomes, you have already mastered the most important thing, the ability to lead yourself. That is why discipline is not the enemy of freedom. It is the doorway to it. There is something deeply symbolic about the early hours before sunrise. When the world is still covered in silence and darkness, most people remain asleep, wrapped in comfort and unaware that time itself is quietly moving forward. But a small number of individuals choose to rise during this sacred window of the day. They wake up not because they are forced to, but because something inside them refuses to remain dormant. These are the dreamers and the builders. The early morning has a psychological quality that is difficult to explain, but impossible to ignore. When you wake up before the world becomes loud and demanding, your mind exists in a rare state of clarity. There are no messages flooding your attention, no expectations from society pulling you in different directions, no urgent noise distracting your thoughts. For a brief moment, your mind belongs entirely to you. This is why the early hours have always belonged to those who create rather than those who merely react. Throughout history, many thinkers, writers, innovators, and leaders discovered that the quiet moments before sunrise hold extraordinary power. In the philosophy of Carl Jung, the human mind contains layers, conscious thoughts on the surface, and deeper unconscious ideas waiting beneath. During the busy hours of the day, those deeper insights often remain hidden because the mind is constantly reacting to external noise. But in the stillness of early morning, something different happens. The unconscious begins to speak more clearly. Ideas that felt distant during the day suddenly become visible. Solutions to problems begin to appear with surprising simplicity. Creative thoughts flow with less resistance because the mind has not yet been cluttered by the chaos of the outside world. It is as if the brain has been reset, allowing you to see possibilities that were invisible before. But the early hours are not only for dreaming, they are also for building. Dreams without action remain illusions. Vision without effort slowly fades into regret. This is why the builders of the world use these quiet hours, not just to imagine a better future, but to begin constructing it piece by piece. When you wake up early, you gain something that most people constantly claim they do not have: time. Time to read and expand your understanding of the world. Time to strengthen your body and sharpen your discipline. Time to write, plan, think, and move toward the person you are trying to become. Most people begin their day already behind. They wake up late, rush into responsibilities, and immediately start reacting to demands placed on them by others. Their entire day becomes a series of responses rather than deliberate choices. But the dreamer who wakes early changes this pattern. Instead of chasing the day, they shape it. The early hours become a private K-shop where identity is quietly built, skills are developed, knowledge is absorbed, ideas are refined, and these small daily investments slowly accumulate into something powerful over time. The most fascinating part of this process is how invisible it appears in the beginning. Waking up early for a few days seems insignificant. Even a few weeks may not show dramatic results. But growth rarely announces itself with sudden fireworks. It moves slowly and silently. Yet months later, the difference becomes undeniable. The person who consistently used their mornings to grow begins thinking more clearly, acting more confidently, and moving through life with greater purpose. While others remain trapped in the cycle of distraction and reaction, the early riser has been quietly constructing a different future. In this way, the early morning becomes more than just a time of day. It becomes a symbol of conscious living. It represents the moment when a person stops drifting with the crowd and begins walking their own path. The dreamers use this time to imagine possibilities that others cannot see. The builders use this time to turn those possibilities into reality. And eventually, the rest of the world wakes up and wonders how these individuals moved so far ahead. But the truth is simple. While others were sleeping, they were already building their destiny. Silence has a strange effect on the human mind. Most people think they want peace and quiet, but when true silence finally surrounds them, something unexpected begins to happen. Thoughts that were buried beneath the noise of daily life slowly start to rise to the surface. Feelings that were ignored begin to demand attention. Questions that were avoided quietly return. In those moments, a person is no longer distracted by the outside world. they are left alone with themselves. And this is often when the shadow begins to appear. In the psychology of Carl Jung, the shadow represents the hidden side of the human personality. It contains the parts of ourselves that we prefer not to acknowledge, fears we hide, anger we suppress, insecurities we deny, and desires we believe are unacceptable. Throughout life, people learn to push these parts of themselves into the unconscious because society rewards the image we present, not the complexity that exists beneath it. So people build masks. They present confidence even when they feel uncertain. They show kindness while hiding resentment. They claim certainty while secretly struggling with doubt. During the busy hours of the day, these masks work well. Life moves quickly, conversations distract the mind, and responsibilities keep attention focused outward. There is always something happening that prevents a person from looking too deeply within. But silence removes those distractions. When the world becomes quiet, especially during the early hours of the morning, the mind begins to slow down. Without constant stimulation, thoughts that were pushed aside finally have the space to return. This is when many people start to feel a subtle discomfort. Old memories surface, unresolved emotions appear, doubts begin whispering in the background of the mind. Most people react to this moment by escaping it. They reach for their phones, they turn on music or television, they search for anything that can quickly fill the silence again, not because silence is harmful, but because silence reveals things they are not ready to face. But the person who chooses to remain in that quiet space experiences something different. Instead of running from these thoughts, they begin observing them. They notice the fear that tries to convince them they are not capable. They recognize the anger that has been quietly influencing their decisions. They see the insecurity that has been shaping how they present themselves to the world. At first, this confrontation can feel uncomfortable. The shadow is not always pleasant to encounter. It reminds us of mistakes, weaknesses, and unresolved parts of our personality. Yet Jung believed that this confrontation is not a sign of failure. It is the beginning of psychological growth, because the shadow does not disappear simply because we ignore it. When it remains unconscious, it quietly controls behavior from behind the scenes. It influences reactions, relationships, and decisions in ways we barely notice. People who never confront their shadow often find themselves repeating the same destructive patterns again and again, wondering why their lives never seem to change. But when a person becomes aware of their shadow, something powerful begins to happen. The hidden parts of the mind slowly move into consciousness. Instead of acting out unconsciously, these emotions and instincts can now be understood, managed, and integrated into a balanced personality. Fear becomes courage once it is recognized. Anger becomes clarity once it is understood. Doubt becomes motivation once it is faced directly. This is why silence holds such transformative power. In the quiet hours, a person has the rare opportunity to observe their inner world without distraction. The mind becomes like a mirror reflecting parts of the self that were previously invisible, and although this reflection may not always be comfortable, it reveals something essential: the truth about who we are beneath the masks we wear. Over time, the person who repeatedly enters this silence begins to develop a deeper relationship with themselves. They become less afraid of their emotions and more curious about them. They begin to understand the hidden motivations behind their actions. They become aware of their weaknesses, but also of strengths, gifts they never realized they possessed. Gradually, the shadow stops being an enemy. It becomes a source of insight. The anger that once felt destructive reveals a desire for justice. The fear that once caused avoidance reveals areas where courage must grow. The insecurity that once created doubt reveals where self-development is needed. Through this process, the personality becomes more whole. Instead of denying parts of themselves, a person begins integrating them into a stronger and more conscious identity. This is what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming a fully realized human being. And strangely enough, this profound transformation often begins in the simplest environment imaginable, not in noise. not in chaos, but in silence. Because when the world finally becomes quiet, the shadow steps forward, not to destroy you, but to show you the parts of yourself that were waiting to be understood. There comes a moment in a person's life when they begin to realize that drifting through existence is not the same as truly living. Many people move from one day to the next, almost automatically. They wake up because they have to, rush through responsibilities, react to problems, and fall asleep exhausted, only to repeat the same cycle again the next day. Life becomes a series of reactions rather than a conscious direction. But something powerful changes when a person begins living intentionally. Intentional living means stepping out of unconscious patterns and deciding that your life will no longer be guided by random circumstances or temporary moods. It means recognizing that every day offers a choice. You can either let the world shape you, or you can begin shaping yourself. This realization is deeply connected to the philosophy of Carl Jung. Jung believed that many people live most of their lives unconsciously, repeating habits and behaviors without fully understanding why they do what they do. Their decisions are often influenced by hidden fears, social expectations, or patterns developed long ago. Because of this, they move through life as if they are passengers rather than drivers of their own destiny. Living intentionally is the moment when that pattern begins to break. Instead of simply reacting to the day, you begin directing it. You wake up with awareness. You ask yourself what truly matters, what kind of person you want to become, and what actions today will move you closer to that identity. At first, this shift may feel small. It might begin with something as simple as deciding how you will start your morning. Rather than immediately surrendering your attention to the noise of the world, you take a moment to think, reflect, and prepare your mind. That quiet decision sets the tone for everything that follows, because the way you begin your day often shapes the way you live your life. When you start with intention, your actions begin to align with your deeper values. Instead of chasing distractions, you focus on growth. Instead of allowing emotions to control your choices, you pause and respond thoughtfully. You begin to notice where your time is going and whether those hours are building the life you truly want. This awareness gradually changes the relationship you have with time. Many people feel as though time is constantly escaping them. They complain that there are never enough hours in the day, yet they rarely examine how those hours are actually spent. Intentional living brings clarity to this problem. You begin to see that time itself is not the issue. The issue is unconscious living. Once you become aware of how your days unfold, you gain the power to redesign them. You choose when to work on meaningful goals. You decide when to rest and recover. You invest energy into learning, creating, and strengthening yourself. Slowly, your life begins to feel less chaotic and more purposeful. Another important change happens within your sense of identity. When you live intentionally, you no longer see yourself as someone who is simply hoping for a better future. Instead, you become someone actively building it. Your actions start reflecting the person you want to become rather than the person you have always been. This shift is subtle but powerful. Each intentional choice reinforces the belief that your life is not a random accident. It is a project that you are continuously shaping through daily decisions. Every habit you build, every skill you practice, every moment you invest in self-awareness becomes part of a larger transformation. Of course, living intentionally does not mean life suddenly becomes easy. Challenges will still appear. Unexpected obstacles will still arise. But the difference is that you face these moments with clarity rather than confusion. Instead of feeling lost or powerless, you understand that difficulty is part of the path you have consciously chosen. And because the path is chosen, the struggle becomes meaningful. Over time, the person who lives intentionally begins to experience a deeper sense of direction. Their actions align with their purpose. Their habits support their goals. Their days are no longer random sequences of events, but deliberate steps towards something greater. Eventually, people around them begin to notice the difference. While others feel overwhelmed by life's unpredictability, this person moves with quiet confidence. They know where they are going because they have taken the time to decide. Living intentionally does not require perfection. It requires awareness. It requires the courage to step out of automatic living and begin making conscious choices about how you spend your time, your energy, and your attention. And once that awareness awakens, something extraordinary happens. You stop wandering through life. You begin directing it. The truth about the 5 a.m. mindset is deeper than productivity. It is a psychological awakening. It is the moment when a person stops drifting through life and begins consciously shaping who they are becoming. Morning after morning, you face your weakness. Morning after morning, you strengthen your will. And one day you will realize something remarkable. The person who once struggled to wake up has become someone powerful enough to awaken their entire life.